The cold clang of a business card hitting the service tray echoed through the first-class cabin, like a blade cutting through the air of luxury. Victor Grant sat upright, his gaze calm, yet razor-sharp, fixed on the attendant before him. On the small card, embossed letters gleamed under the cabin lights. Victor Grant, CEO. Grant Industries. A single sentence, brief and absolute, was enough to erase every sound. I just acquired controlling shares of this airline. The entire crew is terminated, effective immediately. In an instant, the pride on Brittany Hale's face, the chief flight attendant, melted into sheer panic. Passengers around froze, lowering their phones only after capturing the drama. Some sat in stunned silence. Others gasped in disbelief, unable to comprehend what had just unfolded before their eyes. Power, usually invisible, had suddenly become blinding, tangible in that very moment. But to understand the magnitude of this upheaval, we must step back to dawn breaking over Lake Michigan. Before becoming the center of an entire flight, Victor was simply a 46-year-old man, standing alone before the glass windows of his towering Chicago penthouse. The first light painted golden streaks across the lake, but inside him, that light carried the weight of resolve. Victor Grant was not born into privilege. After a tragic accident claimed the lives of his parents, the orphaned black boy grew up in the modest kitchen of his grandmother Pearl on the South Side. There, between the scent of simmering stew and second-hand clothes, Pearl taught him one unshakable truth. Stand tall, Victor. You're no less than anyone, and no greater either. But remember, to get half, you'll have to work twice as hard. The boy etched those words into his soul, carrying them as a torch through life. Now, after sleepless nights at Northwestern, after days crashing on friends' couches to save money for his MBA, after thousands of moments being underestimated for the color of his skin, that boy had become one of only 8 black CEOs in the Fortune 500. But today, personal courage was not enough. Ahead lay another battle. The deal with Technova in San Francisco, a tech giant where the percentage of black employees was nearly non-existent. If successful, the deal could open the door to change across the American tech industry. If it failed, diversity efforts would once again be dismissed, as they so often had been. A quiet sound stirred behind him. "Your coffee, Mr. Grant." Doris Jenkins, his longtime housekeeper, placed the steaming cup on the table. "Thank you, Doris." Victor adjusted his Armani suit. Not flashy, not loud, but precise, tailored like armor for the battlefield of commerce. His phone buzzed. The screen lit up with the smiling face of Layla, his daughter, a sophomore at Howard University, radiant despite the early morning. "Good morning, Dad. Just wanted to wish you luck with Technova." Victor's lips softened into a smile. "Thank you, my little angel. How's the biochem project?" "Almost finished. Professor Williams thinks it might get published." Pride swelled in his chest. "That's incredible. Just like your mother." But at the mention of Ava, his wife, gone 5 years to cancer, Victor's eyes clouded, emptiness seeping in like the chill of dawn. "Are you okay, Dad?" Layla asked softly. He swallowed the knot in his throat. "Your mother would be so proud. I'll call after the meeting. I love you." "Love you too. Show Silicon Valley who you are." When the call ended, Victor closed his eyes, beginning his daily 5-minute meditation. In the stillness, he saw Pearl again, adjusting the collar of a young boy's jacket, reminding him that every success would cost double the effort. The intercom chimed. "Mr. Grant, Tara has arrived." Tara Nguyen, his 32-year-old assistant, entered with a glowing tablet. Quick, sharp, Wharton MBA, the kind of woman Victor believed would one day lead her own company. "Good morning, Tara. What's the battle plan?" Technova has 2% of its technical staff black. 0 black leaders. Our proposal is a dedicated recruitment and retention program. But, her eyes hardened, Thomas Beckett will be on your flight. He's pushing a counterfeit plan, just window dressing the numbers. Victor's lips curved. Beckett, the embodiment of the old guard. Paper, thin diversity painted in empty words. This would be more than a contract. It was a fight for the future. Descending the stairs, Victor met Eric Lawson, his driver, waiting beside a gleaming black Lincoln Continental. The young man stood stiff, avoiding Victor's eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Grant. O'Hare, correct?" "Correct, Eric, and call me Victor." On the road, Eric hesitated before speaking. "If you don't mind, my son, he's 17, wants to study business. As a successful black man, do you have any advice for him?" Victor looked at him through the rearview mirror. He had been asked this question hundreds of times, and each time it weighed on his heart. "Tell him to find mentors who see his potential, not just his skin. Tell him that even in a room full of faces unlike his, he has every right to be there. And most importantly, when he succeeds, remind him to leave the door open for those who come after." Eric nodded firmly, eyes glistening. "Thank you. That means a lot." The car turned into the VIP entrance at the airport. Immediately, a security officer frowned at Victor, in his immaculate suit, stepping from a luxury car, but still a black man. "ID and ticket." The voice was cold, nothing like the cheerful, "Good morning, sir," he had offered the white passenger just before. Victor drew in a deep breath, another familiar scar. He handed over his papers, silently reminding himself, today was not just a flight. Today was the day the world would see what it had long ignored. The line of passengers inched forward through first-class security. Victor checked his watch, still time before boarding for San Francisco, but he felt the disparity in every movement of the TSA staff. The white man ahead of him was waved through with a cursory glance, laptop untouched in his bag. When it was Victor's turn, the officer's eyes sharpened. He flipped the ticket, inspecting every detail as if Victor might have printed it in his garage. "Do you have a second form of ID?" The voice was cold, suspicious. Victor handed over his driver's license, his face calm, the practiced mask forged through thousands of similar moments. But inside, the familiar wave surged, the feeling of being treated as an outsider in the very world he helped build. "You've been selected for additional screening," the officer continued flatly. "Randomly." "Random?" Victor repeated, his eyes flashing. But he stepped aside, lifting his arms as another agent began searching. People stared. Some quickly looked away. Others didn't bother to hide their curiosity. In that moment, a memory surfaced. Young Victor, wearing a borrowed suit for his first job interview, being stopped by a building guard and asked who he was delivering packages for. Decades had passed, But the script was the same, only the stage had changed. Finally, he was cleared. On his face, a polite smile. In his chest, steel resolve. Today there would be no silent acceptance. Victor moved into the first-class lounge, a gleaming space of leather chairs, fine liquor, and glass walls reflecting wealth. He was reviewing his presentation on a tablet when a voice rose behind him. "Victor Grant, what a surprise to see you here." Thomas Beckett. Tall, 53, broad, shouldered in a Brooks Brothers suit, carrying himself as though the room belonged to him. His smile never touched his eyes, just a polished mask. "Thomas." Victor nodded, shaking his hand. "Also heading to San Francisco?" "Indeed. A meeting with Technova, I assume." Beckett's tone was slow, threaded with mockery. Victor remained steady. "It's an important opportunity. The future of technology is not just about products, but about people." Beckett smirked. "I've always admired the way you turn everything into a diversity issue. Very on brand." The words "people like you" dripped like acid. Victor had heard it countless times, and it still burned. He tightened his grip on the tablet, but answered with even precision. "Data proves diversity drives innovation. But I'm sure you already know that." Beckett laughed, a booming sound that drowned out the soft lounge music. "Always so serious. You really are a role model for your community." Before Victor could reply, they reached the reception desk. The attendant beamed at Beckett. "Good morning, Mr. Beckett," then turned to Victor, her tone cool. "Please present your membership card and boarding pass." Beckett interjected, condescending. "He's with me, a business partner." Victor placed his own platinum card on the counter. "Actually, I have my own membership." "Thank you." The attendant flushed as the scanner lit green. "Apologies, Mr. Grant. Please proceed." Victor walked past, spine straight, a thin smile on his lips. Inside, he felt no triumph, only weariness. The price of recognition was always the same, proving himself again and again. In the lounge corner, Beckett ordered scotch for them both. "Water for me," Victor interrupted. Beckett shrugged, uninterested. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Frankly, I think Technova needs practical solutions, not social experiments. They want someone who understands their culture." The sentence landed like a slap. The subtext was clear. You don't belong. Victor's phone buzzed. A message from Caleb Monroe, long-time ally on the board. "Careful, Beckett is spreading rumors about our financials." Victor's jaw tightened. Another covert strike. Familiar, but never painless. He stepped aside, dialing his attorney, Anand Patel. "Anand, check trading activity. I suspect Beckett Tech is manipulating with shorts." Patel's voice came crisp. "There's unusual volume, heavy shorting since yesterday. We'll act." Victor ended the call, his eyes catching Beckett's from across the room. That face wore a faint, unreadable smile. The announcement rang out. "First, class passengers on flight 2507 to San Francisco, now boarding." Beckett rose, adjusting his tie, voice smug. "Let's see who wins, Victor. Good luck." Victor followed, eyes cold, heart heavy but unyielding. He knew the real battle was not about a seat in first class. It was about whether the world was ready to watch a black man redefine the game. The jet bridge gleamed like a narrow passage into a world both luxurious and treacherous. Victor Grant walked with the ease of someone long familiar with airports, but inside he knew every step forward was another test of belonging. At the aircraft door, he was met by the fixed smile of Brittany Hale, the chief flight attendant, blonde hair in a tight bun, uniform crisp, lipstick sharp. "Good morning," Victor said, offering his boarding pass. Her smile faltered. "You are in first class?" She turned the statement into a question. Victor kept his tone steady. "Yes." "Seat 2A." Brittany tilted her head, her eyes scanning from his face down the tailored suit and back to the ticket. "I'll need to double." "Check." She turned the boarding pass over, inspecting every corner as if searching for signs of forgery. Behind him, a white couple whispered, their curious eyes on Victor's back. He felt it acutely, that look that had shadowed him since childhood and followed him into the Fortune 500 boardroom. "Is there a problem?" Victor asked, his voice low and firm. "Just making sure. First class is fully booked today." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but the blade beneath was clear. Maybe he was in the wrong place. Victor drew a deep breath, then replied slowly, "There is no mistake. I want to sit in the seat I paid for." Brittany frowned slightly, then stepped inside. Through the open door, Victor could see her whispering with a colleague, her hand pointing toward him, her voice low but dripping with suspicion. Moments later, a tall man with salt and pepper hair stepped out from the cockpit. Owen Fraser, the first officer, carried the air of someone accustomed to obedience. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, though his eyes were fixed not on Victor, but on Brittany. "This man claims he has a first-class seat," Brittany answered, deliberately stressing the word claims. Victor clenched his jaw. "I don't claim. My ticket and membership have already been verified. Platinum. Over 2 million miles with this airline." Fraser glanced at the ticket, then looked up. "Your name is Victor Grant?" "Yes." "Do you have another form of identification?" The question was redundant. His boarding pass had been scanned at the gate. But Victor, with the patience born of a lifetime, pulled out his driver's license. He knew anger would only confirm their bias. Just then, footsteps echoed behind him. Thomas Beckett appeared, his practiced smile in place. "What's going on here?" Brittany's demeanor shifted instantly, like a switch flipped. "Welcome, Mr. Beckett. We're just sorting out a minor seating issue." Beckett clapped Victor's shoulder, his tone half joke, half condescension. "Victor's an old friend. CEO of Grant Industries. He belongs in first class." What sounded like defense was in truth a reminder. Victor's belonging was valid only once a white man confirmed it. He bit down hard, saying nothing. Brittany's voice softened for Beckett. "Seat 3C. Just this way, sir." Then she turned back to Victor, eyes frosty once more. In that moment, a young black woman seated in economy glanced at Victor. Her eyes burned with quiet fury. Then she gave the smallest nod, a silent signal of solidarity, a message unspoken. "I understand. I've been there." Fraser spoke firmly. "Mr. Grant, if you want this resolved quickly, I suggest you sit in economy for now. After takeoff, we'll sort it out." The suggestion landed like a public demotion. Victor met his gaze, his words dropping like hammers. "No. I will not accept being downgraded simply because you cannot believe a black man belongs in first class." The air froze. Behind him, passengers murmured. Then phones began to rise, lenses flashing. Social media was already gathering evidence for a storm about to break. Fraser snapped. "No one has mentioned race here." Victor arched an eyebrow. "You don't need to say it. Your actions speak clearly enough." The cockpit door clicked open. Captain Michael Rhodes emerged, military in bearing, his eyes sweeping the scene. He spoke slowly, as if to smother flames. "I understand there's some confusion about a seat." "There is no confusion," Victor answered instantly. "Only unreasonable scrutiny aimed at me." The cabin buzzed with whispers. Some passengers shook their heads at the crew. Others looked at Victor with a mix of pity and doubt. "Mr. Grant, correct?" Rhodes asked, keeping his authoritative tone. "We simply want to ensure the comfort and safety of everyone." Victor's laugh was cold. "So your policy is multiple ID checks, but only for people who look like me?" Brittany cut in, her voice sharp. "You're being uncooperative." Victor turned on her. "Uncooperative? I've remained professional while being treated like a fraud." The exchange silenced the entire cabin. Somewhere in the back, a passenger muttered, "Just let him sit." Another nodded. Agreement rippled through the rows. Captain Rhodes drew a hard breath, then muttered low to Fraser and Brittany. But Victor heard every word. "If necessary, call security. Remove him." In that instant, Victor's blood surged. He had been threatened before, but this was different. This wasn't about one seat. This was the entire system standing in his way. And he knew he could not back down. The air in the boarding cabin was strung tight, like a wire about to snap. Captain Michael Rhodes fixed his cold eyes on Victor Grant, his voice dropping low like a chambered round. "Mr. Grant, either comply and sit in economy, or we will call airport security. The choice is yours." Whispers rippled instantly through the rows. Some passengers leaned out of their seats, holding their breath. Others raised their phones higher, lenses ready to capture a moment destined to explode across social media. Victor did not answer immediately. He stood tall, his gaze locked on Captain Rhodes. Every vein in his body beat like a war drum. This was not the first time he had been threatened with security. From his days as a black student at Northwestern, stopped by campus police for looking suspicious, to the early years of his career when financial district guards trailed him step by step simply because he wore a suit but not a white face. Every time, power had been wielded like a club, meant to make him bow. But today, he would not bow. Victor drew in a breath, then spoke loudly enough for every phone recording to catch every word. "You are threatening to remove me, simply because I dared to sit in the seat I paid for." The murmurs surged. A middle-aged white man in the row behind frowned, calling out, "Let him sit! He has a ticket!" A young woman nodded, and the agreement spread like a small wave. Rhodes clenched his teeth, signaling to Brittany Hale. Her face was taut with both embarrassment and fury as she snapped in a shrill tone, "Mr. Grant, you are obstructing the boarding process. Please comply or leave the plane." Victor gave a thin smile. "Obstructing? I haven't even left my place. You are the ones holding up this entire flight. because you cannot believe a black man belongs in first class." The words struck like a spark to tinder. A few passengers clapped lightly. Phones flashed. The hashtag #HatFirstClass. While black began spreading from within the cabin itself. But the crew did not yield. A woman in a business suit pushed through the crowd. Paula Kramer, an airline supervisor, wore a professional smile that could not hide the irritation in her eyes. "What's happening here?" Victor turned to her, his tone calm but steel, hard. "What's happening is that I've shown my ticket and ID multiple times, yet somehow I'm still treated like a fraud. They suggested I sit in economy, and now they threaten security. All because they cannot accept that someone like me belongs in first class." Paula's smile wavered. "Surely this is just a misunderstanding, Mr. Grant. No one is discriminating here." Victor's mouth curved coldly. "Then explain. Why am I the only one checked 3 times? Why is my ticket suspicious, while others are greeted with champagne and hot towels?" For a moment, Paula's smile cracked. She shot Brittany a sharp look. But Brittany muttered under her breath, "Maybe he's just agitated." The word slipped into at least 5 cameras. A few passengers gasped audibly. Victor remained unmoving, not shouting, not flailing. His calm, that very calm, turned into a whip lashing their denials. "You think I'm playing the race card?" he asked, his voice low and cold. "No. I'm playing the only card that matters, the credit card that paid thousands for this seat." The atmosphere strained to breaking. Rhodes, red with anger, stepped closer. "If you do not comply immediately, I will have security remove you." This was the moment. Every cell in Victor's body screamed, "Do not yield, do not bow." Slowly, he pulled out his phone. A hush fell. "He's going to live stream?" someone whispered. But Victor did not open the camera. He tapped a contact, lifted the phone to his ear. "Marcus," he said, his voice ringing clear, every word echoing through the cabin. "Initiate Plan C. Immediately. I want controlling shares of Continental Airlines, whatever it costs." The cabin erupted in gasps. Rhodes froze. Brittany's eyes went wide. Paula paled. Phones shook as Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram notifications began chiming all at once. Victor went on, his gaze never leaving Rhodes. "Yes, Marcus. I know the board hasn't approved, but as the largest shareholder, I authorize the transaction. Do it now." He paused, silence slicing through the cabin, then added, "I'll expect confirmation in 5 minutes." Lowering the phone, Victor's eyes cut like blades. A terrible quiet blanketed first class. Everyone understood. They had just witnessed an unthinkable reversal. Rhodes stammered, You can't." Victor cut him off, his voice dropping like a hammer. "I can. And I just did." In that moment, the balance of power spun on its axis. The crew, once wielding the authority to eject a passenger, had become pawns about to be swept from the board. The short chime from Victor Grant's phone rang out, but it was like a death knell for the fate of the entire crew. He looked down at the screen, his eyes flashing with a sharp light. The confirmation email of the transaction. Washington Industries, his conglomerate, now officially owned 26% of Continental Airlines, making him the largest shareholder. The cabin froze. so silent one could hear the pounding heartbeat of someone drowning in fear. Victor turned the screen toward Captain Rhodes. "You see, this is not a threat. This is reality." Rhodes swallowed hard, his face burning with a mix of rage and dread. Brittany Hale stepped back half a pace, clutching the passenger manifest like it was her last lifeline. Paula Kramer, the supervisor, had gone pale, forcing a smile but betrayed by trembling lips. Victor spoke, his voice not loud but heavy as lead. "What you did to me, in front of every passenger, under the cameras of dozens of phones. You turned my presence into an interrogation. Now I turn your careers into a lesson for the entire airline industry." Brittany stammered, her voice cracking. "You can't, not over a small misunderstanding." Victor cut her off, eyes like blades. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a repeated pattern. Discrimination, suspicion, dismissal. And this time, the consequences will be remembered." He pulled a business card from his wallet and placed it on the service tray in front of Brittany. "Victor Grant, CEO, Grant Industries." "Effective immediately," he declared. "The entire crew of this flight is terminated. Discrimination has a price." Murmurs erupted from the rows. A passenger in seat 1C blurted out, "Oh my God, he actually just fired the whole crew." Phones lifted higher, their frames shaking with the tremor of excited hands. Thomas Beckett, sitting in 3C, suddenly leaned back, his face shifting from smugness to shock. He muttered, I didn't know Grant Industries was planning this." Victor turned to him, his voice cold as ice. "There are many things you don't know about me, Thomas." At that moment, Paula's phone buzzed violently. She pressed it to her ear, listening for a few seconds before paling further, then handed it to Victor with shaking hands. "It's the CEO of Continental. He wants to speak with you." Victor held the phone to his ear. A raspy male voice came through. "Edward Shaw, CEO of Continental." "Victor, I've been briefed. Please let me explain." Victor interrupted, calm but cutting like steel. "There is nothing left to explain. The issue is not just me. It is the thousands of customers, the millions of people who have lived through this moment. If I stay silent, you will continue." Silence on the other end. Then Shaw's tense voice returned. "All right. I admit fault. I will call an emergency board meeting within 48 hours. I promise there will be investigation and reform." Victor lowered his voice, but still loud enough for the phone's recording to capture every word. "I don't need promises. I need action. And it begins with replacing this entire crew right now." He ended the call and handed the phone back to Paula. Her face was ghostly, but she nodded rapidly. The plane's PA system crackled to life. "Attention passengers of Flight 2507. This flight will be delayed 45 minutes due to a crew change. We apologize for the inconvenience." A wave of sighs moved through the cabin, but mixed with them was an unusual buzz of excitement. Some passengers applauded, others immediately uploaded clips to Twitter with the hashtag #BlackCEOPower. Victor finally walked past the crew, without a glance back. He sat in seat 2A, tugging at the sleeve of his suit as if he had just put on new armor. From his seat, he watched Brittany, Rhodes, and Fraser exit the plane, their steps heavy, dragging along the wreckage of their careers. A young black woman in economy, the same one who had nodded at him earlier, quietly texted a friend. He stood up. He did what we always wished. Across the aisle, Thomas Beckett leaned toward Victor, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and caution. That was the most impressive display of power I've ever seen. Victor glanced at him, answering flatly. Not a display. Justice. His phone buzzed again. A message from Monica Reyes, head of PR. You're viral. Black CEO power is trending #1 nationwide. Major outlets are calling. Continental has dropped 7% in stock value in 30 minutes. Grant Industries is up 12%. Victor read the words, but there was no triumph in his heart. Instead, there was a quiet weariness, the exhaustion of a man forced to turn himself into a weapon when all he wanted was to be a passenger. Outside the window, the runway stretched like a stark white line, dividing two worlds, one of rot and old power, one of change and hope. And he knew, just moments ago, he had stepped across that line. 40 minutes later, the cabin lights came back on. A completely new crew stepped aboard. Leading them was Captain Helena Ortiz, silver hair shimmering like steel, her presence exuding uncompromising professionalism. She stopped at seat 2A. Mr. Grant, her voice was warm but firm. On behalf of Continental Airlines, I apologize. We are ready to depart whenever you are. Victor looked up, his eyes weary but resolute. He gave a slight nod. Thank you, Captain Ortiz. I appreciate your professionalism. A faint smile touched her lips before she turned back toward the cockpit. Passengers whispered among themselves. Some discreetly snapped photos of Victor, others typed out messages. The hashtag #BlackCEOPower still exploding across Twitter. Victor leaned his head back against the seat, exhaling deeply. He did not feel victory, only the weight pressing down on his shoulders, the burden of being a symbol. His phone buzzed non-stop. A message from Monica Reyes, head of PR. The video has surpassed 5 million views. Hashtag #BlackCEOPower is #1 nationwide. CNN, Bloomberg, EC, all want interviews. Continental stock has dropped another 10%. Grant Industries is up 15%. We are at the center of the storm. Victor closed his eyes. Behind those numbers, he saw only the stark truth. Justice arrives only when it collides with the pockets of those in power. His screen lit again. Layla calling. A short message followed. Dad, you're trending on Twitter. I'm proud, but are you okay? His throat tightened. He typed quickly. I'm fine. Sometimes to stand tall, you must endure the storm. But I will not fall. The plane began to taxi onto the runway. Sunset light poured through the windows, painting the cabin in a somber shade of orange. A grey-haired man, weary but steady, rose and walked toward Victor. Mr. Grant, he said softly. My name is Samuel Bryant. My son is one of the very few black captains at Continental. I just wanted to thank you. What you did today will be remembered for a very long time. Victor gripped the man's hand firmly, nodding. Tell your son I look forward to meeting him. Not to thank him, but to stand with him for change. Samuel smiled, eyes glistening. As he returned to his seat, Victor watched, his heart swelling with both warmth and bitterness. After so many years, they still had to give thanks simply because someone dared to say no to injustice. The plane reached cruising altitude. Meal trays rolled out. But instead of idle chatter, the cabin turned into an impromptu hearing. A Latina businesswoman shared, "In my own office, I've been mistaken more than once for the cleaning staff. I have to prove I'm the director of my own company." An Indian doctor stood, voice heavy. "Patients have refused me simply because of my skin color, no matter the degrees on my wall." Victor listened, each story etching itself into him like marks carved into stone. This was no longer a private moment. This was the echo of millions of voices long ignored. Across the aisle, Thomas Beckett sat quietly, making frantic phone calls. His muffled words leaked out. "Stock falling, diversity numbers must act immediately." Victor glanced at him, recognizing the irony. The very man who once mocked him was now scrambling to salvage his company's image. Yet instead of satisfaction, Victor felt only fatigue. Change born out of fear. Could it ever last? Just then, another message arrived. "Continental's board has called. They want to meet as soon as you land. They are prepared to concede, even restructure the entire leadership team. Awaiting your directive." Victor rested a hand on his forehead, eyes closed. He knew this power was not a game, not a tool for petty punishment. It had to be used to build, to open new doors. But deep inside, one question burned. Why must a black man own an airline just to be respected? A young passenger approached timidly, holding out his phone. "Mr. Grant, may I take a picture with you? My son needs to see this. He needs to believe that one day he can sit where you are." Victor smiled softly and nodded. The flash went off, capturing the moment. But as the man walked away, Victor sighed. He did not want to be a legend for a moment. He wanted a future where no child needed such pictures as proof. Outside the window, the sky stretched wide. The plane soared on, carrying a man who had become an unwilling symbol and a silent promise. He would not let this moment go to waste. San Francisco greeted them with the brilliant glow of sunset, yet not a single ray of light could hide the storm waiting on the ground. As the plane came to a stop, Victor Grant looked through the window and saw clusters of reporters packed behind the security barriers. Cameras, microphones, phones, all aimed at the exit. "Mr. Grant," a new flight attendant whispered, "there is quite a crowd of press outside. We have arranged a private exit." Victor shook his head, his voice steady and firm. "No need. I will walk straight out. If I stood up once, I will not hide now." The cabin door opened. Instantly, a barrage of flashes exploded, surrounding him like a pack of wolves. "Mr. Grant, did you truly fire the entire crew? Did you buy shares of Continental only because of this incident? Do you fear becoming someone exploiting a scandal?" Victor raised his hand, a gesture calm but commanding, and the flood of questions choked into silence. He looked directly into the cameras, his voice ringing clear. "What happened today is not just my story. It is the story of millions who have been doubted, dismissed, simply because of their skin or their background. The only difference is that I have the resources to respond. But justice should not depend on the power of one individual. It must be the natural right of everyone." His words dropped like a stone, and silence blanketed the crowd for a few seconds. Then, almost at once, dozens of microphones were pushed higher. Hands trembled, knowing they had just captured a statement destined to be tomorrow's headline. Victor moved forward. Around him, passengers from the same flight stepped up to shake his hand, murmuring, "Thank you." Some even live-streamed on the spot, turning the moment into a global wave. At the luxury hotel where Victor was staying, another surprise awaited. Initially, the meeting with Teknova was scheduled at their headquarters, but as he entered the lobby, CEO Vivian Cho was already waiting, along with her entire senior leadership team. "Mr. Grant," Vivian began, her voice a mix of tension and respect, "we thought it would be better to meet you here. Private, safe." Victor observed carefully. He saw the calculation behind her smile. Teknova was wary of being dragged into scandal. Yet he also recognized an opportunity. The board had just shifted. They entered the conference room. Every gaze fell on Victor, as though he had become the center of gravity for the fate of multiple corporations. Vivian spoke first. "After what happened, our board has deliberated. The proposal from Grant Industries may need to expand further. We do not want a token program. We want real change." Victor sat still, not replying immediately. He let the silence stretch, a tactic honed from hundreds of negotiations. That silence forced them to reveal more. Across the table, Thomas Beckett was also present. But gone was his swagger from the morning. He now looked deflated, eyes glued to his papers, hands restless. Vivian continued, slower this time. "We are aware that Beckett Tech presented a solution that was superficial. After this incident, the board wants Grant Industries, to become our lead partner. You will guide the restructuring of personnel, not just in Teknova, but across our satellite companies." Victor raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. The scandal, what many thought would be his downfall, had become leverage. He turned to Beckett. "What do you think, Thomas?" Beckett swallowed hard. I admit my company has not done enough. Perhaps it is time for change. I am ready to cooperate." The room stirred. A man who once dismissed the very idea of diversity, now forced to concede in public. Victor nodded slightly, then swept his gaze across the table. "If you want change, it must go all the way, not numbers polished on a report. It must be scholarships. It must be mentoring. It must be real paths for advancement. I will take part, but only under one condition: absolute transparency. Data public, results public. No tricks." Vivian Cho smiled, this time more genuinely. "We agree." When the meeting ended, the Teknova executives departed, leaving Beckett lingering behind. He spoke softly to Victor, his voice a confession. "I should have spoken when they stopped you at the airplane door. But I stayed silent. I am sorry." Victor met his eyes. "What matters is not today's apology, Thomas. What matters is what you will say and do tomorrow. Allies are not made in a moment. Allies are a process." Beckett nodded, his face shadowed with uncertainty. Would this be true change, or just another mask? The answer would come with time. That night, as Victor stood by the hotel window, the lights of San Francisco stretched out like a sea of stars. He felt it clearly. A new battle had begun. He had turned humiliation into leverage. Yet the sense of triumph mingled with a deep exhaustion. He whispered, almost to himself, "It is not I who won. It is justice that was given a chance to speak." Outside, social media still burned with frenzy. But inside that room, there was only one man standing silent, carrying the resolve that tomorrow he would not just defend his own dignity, but carve a path for those who had never been given the chance to sit in first class. At dawn, as San Francisco began to stir, the emergency boardroom of Continental Airlines was already prepared. The tense faces of executives appeared one by one, some on screens, others in person. The air was thick with unease when Edward Shaw, CEO of Continental, began, "Mr. Grant, we are fully aware of the weight of this situation. The stock has dropped another 15% overnight. Social media is flooded with the hashtag Black CEO Power. Without decisive action, Continental will lose all market trust." Victor sat at the head of the table, back straight, hands clasped. He remained silent, letting their words echo through the room. Silence, yet more commanding than the strike of a gavel. Another board member spoke, voice trembling. "We have been meeting all night, and we would like to negotiate with you. Instead of confrontation, we hope for cooperation. You could help us reform the system, turn Continental into a model of diversity and fairness." Victor raised an eyebrow. That word help sounded like a sedative, but he knew the truth. They needed him. They needed more than capital. They needed his presence to save a sinking brand. He answered slowly, "I will not become your media shield. If I get involved, it will not be about appearances. It will be real restructuring." The screens buzzed with whispers. An executive objected sharply, voice hard. "You demand too much. We only need you to ease this crisis, not dictate terms." Victor turned his head, eyes locking on the camera. "Too much? You think a half-hearted apology erases the humiliation experienced by millions of black customers? You think a press release is enough? No. If you do not change at the root, then trust me, the market will do it for me, and it will be far more ruthless." His words struck like thunder. The room froze. Edward Shaw took a deep breath, then slowly nodded. "Then what are your conditions?" Victor opened his tablet, the glow of the screen cutting across his face like a blade. "First, every recruitment, promotion, and disciplinary process must be audited, with quarterly data made public. Second, a scholarship fund for aviation will be created, named after my grandmother, Pearl Grant, to open doors for young people from underrepresented communities. Third, mandatory training on equity and diversity for every employee, from flight attendants to the CEO." He paused, eyes sweeping over each face. "And finally, I will hold an observer seat on the board. Not to monitor from afar, but to be present at the center of every decision." A ripple of protest rose. A marketing executive shouted, "This is a takeover. He wants to control the company." Victor's gaze sharpened, his voice cutting like steel. "No, I want to save it. If not, then you are the ones letting it collapse." At that moment, Victor's phone buzzed. He placed it on speaker. The voice of Monica Reyes, PR director, filled the room. "Mr. Grant, CNN is broadcasting live. The story has become the top headline. Continental is facing nationwide boycott calls. More than 30 investment firms have announced suspension of cooperation until changes are made. How should I respond to the press? Victor did not look at the phone. He looked directly at the board. You heard her. This is no longer a proposal. This is survival. Silence. Then Edward Shaw finally nodded, his voice heavy. Very well. We accept. Continental will change. You will lead the way. Murmurs spread, but this time they were not resistance. They were surrender. Victor gave a small nod, his eyes weary, yet still blazing with resolve. Good. Then we begin now. I do not want a meeting of promises. I want an action plan within 7 days. When the meeting adjourned, Victor stood before the massive glass window overlooking San Francisco Bay. The sky was a clear blue, birds gliding freely in the wind, never questioned for the color of their feathers. In that moment, he remembered Pearl's gaze years ago as she straightened the collar of young Victor's shirt before his first day of school. Stand tall, Victor. Do not let anyone make you bow your head. Today, he had stood tall, not just for himself, but for countless others who had never been allowed to step into first class on airplanes and in life. 6 months later. O'Hare Airport, Chicago. The departure board glowed with the next Continental Airlines flight to Los Angeles. Victor Grant wheeled his suitcase toward the first-class gate. The atmosphere here was different now. Flight attendants of every background, genuine smiles, no suspicious stares or probing looks. A young woman with her curly hair tied high stepped forward, her smile bright. Welcome, Mr. Grant. We're honored to serve you today. Victor nodded, a quiet wave of relief rising inside him. 6 months had passed, and yet the change was already visible. Behind it lay hundreds of hours of negotiation, dozens of heated meetings, and thousands of small but steadfast decisions. Inside the first-class cabin, Victor settled into the familiar seat, 2A. He leaned back, remembering the moment 6 months earlier, the same seat. But then it had felt like an open wound. Now the air was calmer. But the scar remained, reminding him that victory was not the end, only the beginning. The cabin door opened. A familiar figure stepped in, no longer in a flight attendant's uniform, but in the plain clothes of a passenger. Brittany Hale. The air seemed to freeze. Their eyes locked. She paused, took a deep breath, and walked toward him. Her voice was lower now, stripped of arrogance. Mr. Grant, I didn't know I'd see you on this flight. But I want to say thank you. Victor stayed silent, observing. I was furious after being fired, Brittany continued, her eyes downcast. I blamed everyone but myself. But then I attended Continental's new mandatory diversity training, and I realized what I did to you that day wasn't just suspicion, it was discrimination. It was a wound I helped create. She paused, pulling a business card from her pocket. Now I'm training to become a diversity educator for the airline industry. I want to use my own mistakes to make sure others don't repeat them. Victor looked at the card, a swirl of emotions rising. The old anger still lingered, but so did recognition of the sincerity in her eyes. Real change doesn't begin with excuses, he said slowly. It begins with admission. If you've taken that step, then keep going. But remember this. Don't call it a favor. Call it responsibility. Brittany nodded softly. I understand. Thank you for not turning your back. She walked away, leaving behind a heavy silence. Victor watched her go, wondering, could personal redemption ever be enough to change a whole system? Perhaps not, but it was a start. The flight took off. When the plane leveled, another familiar face appeared at Victor's seat. Keisha Porter, the young black woman who had once nodded to him in solidarity from economy class. But now Keisha was no longer a passenger. She wore a tailored business suit and a shining nameplate. Director of Customer Experience, Continental Airlines. Mr. Grant, she smiled, pride glowing in her eyes. I wanted to greet you personally. I'm flying with the team today for a meeting in LA on customer experience reform. Victor stood, shaking her hand firmly. You've come a long way. Keisha grinned, her voice steady with hope. Thanks to you. After the incident, I reapplied. This time, they saw me not as a second attendant, but as a leader. And I promise I won't let any passenger go through what you did. Victor was still. A flicker of hope pushed through the heaviness in his chest. Yes, real change was happening. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, Victor stepped off the jet bridge. Waiting there was Captain Samuel Bryant, Jr., the son of the gray-haired man who had shaken Victor's hand 6 months before. In his crisp pilot's uniform, he stepped forward and gripped Victor's hand firmly. Mr. Grant, my father told me everything. I'll be flying the inaugural Pearl Grant Scholarship flight next week. I want you to know, what you did opened the door for me, for us. Victor looked into his proud eyes. For a moment, he saw his younger self, a skinny black boy, stopped at the gates of a school just because he didn't look like a college student. And now, the next generation had stepped into the cockpit. He smiled, his face softening at last. Fly high, Captain Bryant. Fly for all those who were never allowed to lift their heads. On his way out, Victor looked back at the bustling terminal. 6 months ago, this place had been the scene of humiliation and fury. Now, it was proof of the power of refusing to back down. In his heart, he heard Pearl's voice. Stand tall, Victor. No one is better than you, and you are less than no one. He gave a small nod, as if to answer. I stood tall, and I will continue. 1 week later, the grand hall of the Los Angeles Aviation Academy blazed with light. On the stage, a brand new banner hung high, the launch of the Pearl Grant Scholarship. The first Continental Airlines scholarship program for young people of color and minority communities pursuing careers in aviation. Hundreds of students, parents, journalists, and guests filled the room. All eyes turned to the man sitting in the front row, Victor Grant. Today he was not wearing his usual Armani suit. He chose a simple navy suit, a black tie. To him, this was not a ceremony of power, but a ceremony of opportunity. The host invited Victor to the podium. Applause thundered. He walked forward, back straight, but inside, waves of emotion surged. When his hand touched the microphone, he paused, letting the silence settle, letting people truly see him, not as a CEO, but as a man. 6 months ago, he began, his voice warm and deep. I was asked to leave a first-class seat I had paid for. You saw here. Because some people could not believe that someone like me belonged there. But I refused to bow my head. I stayed, and I fought. He stopped, looking toward the rows of students in front, their eyes glowing, reliving that moment. But today, we are not here to retell a confrontation. We are here to open doors. The Pearl Grant Scholarship is not just tuition. It is a promise that no one should ever be asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" simply because of their skin or their background. You, future pilots, engineers, executives, belong to this sky. From the very beginning. Applause erupted again, this time mixed with glistening tears. A young black student, about 18, gripped her friend's hand, lips trembling as if she wanted to shout, "That's right!" Suddenly, the host invited another figure to the stage. Keisha Porter, now Director of Customer Experience, in a dark blue suit. She smiled, her voice clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce someone special. Someone who witnessed and dared to act on that day. Someone who not only changed her own career, but changed the face of Continental Airlines." The entire hall turned. A young face, eyes blazing with resolve. Maya Jones, the former economy-to-class attendant who had once silently nodded to Victor on that flight. Now she walked onto the stage with a new nameplate. Vice President of Customer Experience, Continental Airlines. Victor smiled without meaning to. He remembered that moment, the silent nod in the cabin, a signal of solidarity between two strangers. 6 months later, she had become the highest-ranking leader ever appointed from the front line. Maya spoke, her voice steady and filled with conviction. That day, I was just an economy attendant, powerless as I watched it unfold. I nodded at Mr. Grant, never knowing that nod would mark the beginning of a new journey. Today, I stand here not only as a leader, but as living proof that change is real. The hall rose to its feet, applause rolling on and on. Victor felt his eyes sting. When the ceremony ended, a young man approached. On his shoulders was the crisp uniform of a trainee pilot, a gleaming nameplate. Captain Samuel Bryant, Jr. The son of the gray-haired man who had shaken Victor's hand on that plane 6 months ago. "Mr. Grant," he said, his voice clear and strong, "I will be the one flying the inaugural Pearl Grant Scholarship flight next week. I want you to know, what you did that day was not just for yourself. It was for all of us, who have always had to prove we deserve every inch of this sky." Victor gripped his hand tightly. "Fly high, Captain Bryant. Fly for all those who were forced to sit in second-class seats in life." That night, away from the flashing cameras, Victor returned to his Chicago penthouse. He stood before the glass window, watching the city lights shimmer on Lake Michigan. In his mind, Pearl's voice echoed again. "Stand tall, Victor. No one is better than you, and you are less than no one. But remember, to get half, you must do double." Victor smiled faintly, a tear glinting in his eye. "Grandma, today I did double. But tomorrow, I want the next generation not to have to." I want Layla. I want those students out there to fly only with their own wings. His phone buzzed. A message from Layla. Dad, Professor Williams invited me to present my research at the national conference. I'm soaring, Dad. Because of you. Victor read the words, warmth flooding his chest. He knew this was the true victory, a new generation rising, no longer forced to prove their worth beyond their own talent. Outside, the city blazed with light. Insia. A rare calm settled over him. He had turned humiliation into legacy. From the moment he was pushed from a first-class seat to today, when hundreds of students were placed into the cockpit of the future, the journey closed with a message both simple and eternal. Stand tall, not to confront, but to clear the way for a generation. You've seen it yourself. From a single first-class seat questioned with doubt, Victor Grant turned it into a symbol that changed an entire industry. But the true importance was never about shares, power, or the spotlight of the media. It lay in the single choice he made in that moment. To stand tall, not to bow his head. The question now is no longer for Victor. It is for you. If one day you were pushed out of the place that rightfully belonged to you, not because of a mistake, but because of prejudice, would you walk away in silence, or would you stay and change the entire room? If this story touched you, hit like to spread the message, share so that more people can see it, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next journeys, where justice is ignited from moments that may seem small. And before you leave, drop a comment below. Have you ever stood tall in your own life? We want to hear your story.